G'day and welcome to another episode of Ian Smissen's Photography. Well, it's week 6 in my creative photography challenge. And this week we're looking at ultra-wide angle lenses. Ultra-wide angles can be fantastic to use and give you a really different view and perspective on things, but they add a real challenge because they're so wide. You tend to get more and more into the shot when you're really trying to minimize what you're getting into the shot to make it clear what the subject is. But also, because they have such a great depth of field, they can make it really interesting to shoot from really close foreground all the way to the horizon. But that means you need to find an interesting foreground. It's not just a matter of point it at anything and shoot, because even if you're 3 or 4 meters away with an ultra-wide angle lens, those things tend to disappear into the scene. You need to be very close up. So let's have a look at how I went shooting on the beach last night, and then we'll come back and have a look at a couple of shots on the computer and talk about how the ultra-wide angle lens gives you a different perspective. So welcome, I'm at 13th Beach. Week 6 challenge is ultra wide angle lenses. So I'm going to be shooting here. It's about 45 minutes till sunset. Don't know what the cloud's going to do. At the moment there's a really nice light haze and some high clouds. So I'm hoping we're going to get a really nice colourful sunset. But if not, I'm still going to concentrate on shooting these beautiful rock formations in the foreground here and exploiting the ultra wide angle lens to give me some close-up shots of these, but at the same time showing me the real depth in the landscape all the way out to the horizon. So I'm going to go and get my camera. I've only brought the 12mm lens. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the camera off the tripod, and I'm going to go through and work out where I can see the best composition and take some test shots before I even get the tripod set up. There are so many options here that I need to work out exactly where I'm going to be without being tied to a tripod as the starting point. I'm going to move up and down. There's some really nice little rock pools here that are getting nice wave action going through them when the waves are coming backwards and forwards across them. So I'm going to try and find a nice little composition to start with, and then set the tripod up and take a couple of test shots. So I quite like the look low down, which emphasises the foreground. If I'm high up, I don't quite get the same sense of this fantastic shapes in the foreground. So I'm going to set up low down here as a starting point, and then I'm just going to have to wait for some waves to come over, just like that one, and as they flow backwards across the rocks, click the shutter to get that flow back, which gives you those nice white streaks. Excellent, that's the sort of shot I'm looking for. So this test shot looks pretty good from an exposure point of view, but I'll step you through the process that I take before I move on to getting exactly right here. One is, as you've seen, I'm walking up and down and looking for the right height, the right location, the right direction to shoot in to get the composition that I want. Second thing is focus. I'm using live view on the back here, and if I press the OK button, that takes me into a 10 times magnification, and I can then alter the point of focus there to be about 2 or 3 meters in, which is about a third of the way into the total frame. Get that focus manually and then step back out. The next thing I want to do is to try and work out my exposure. I'm set on aperture priority at the moment, so the auto exposure is going to be right. I'm on f11 at ISO 100, and that's about a 1/15 of a second with the white water coming across the top here. 1/15 of a second is not going to be slow enough for me to slow down the water flowing back out, as we've seen in that test shot. So I'm going to have to put some filters on. And now I'm just going to have to work out about what I want. So if I take 3 stops from 1/15 of a second, that goes 1 stop to an eighth, 1 stop to a quarter, and another stop to a half a second. And half a second's about a good starting point. So I'm going to put a 3-stop neutral density filter in to start with and take a shot there. I'm then going to look at what the sky is looking like. The sky is quite bright in comparison with the dark water in the background, and these rocks in the foreground are quite dark as well. And so I may need to put a neutral density graduated filter on in order to get the right exposure balance between the sky, the foreground, and the midground. So we'll have a go at that and then see what we come up with. Well, this is the first shot that I took last night, and you can immediately see the effect of that ultra-wide angle lens. Remember, I was tilting the camera forward and I had the camera low down on the tripod, very close to these rocks. I was less than half a meter away from these foreground rocks. And because of the wide angle and tilting it forwards, it exaggerates these lines up through here into the center of the photograph. And to some extent, we also get the same thing with the cloud lines. And also note how exaggerated the foreground to midground distance is. This midground, the center of the photograph here, is only about 2 meters away from the camera. But because of the wide angle and the fact that we were tilted forwards, it looks like a much longer distance. And that also exaggerates the flow back through these channels of the water. So even though we're only using a shutter speed of around 1 second here, it looks like a much slower shutter speed because of the distance in the frame that this water is travelling over that period of time.
We're getting some colour in the sky, so I've set up here to shoot these channels instead of going out now, because we're not facing directly into the sun with these channels. I'm getting some diagonal shots with a nice little flat bit of sand that the water is flowing backwards and forwards over. So I'll just take another shot. I'm also trying to bracket at the moment. 3 stops under and 1 stop over. There's no point in me getting too much over, but I need to get the sky, even though I'm using a reverse graduated neutral density filter, I need to get the sky balanced because it's quite dark down here with the shadows on these rocks and very bright in the sky. So I don't want to blow the sun out. So I'm bracketing and I'll be able to blend those in post-processing later. So now I just need a wave to come and wash over here and get that nice wash back over the foreground.
And we see the same thing in this second image. The foreground here is exaggeratedly large, and this central part here is again only about 2 meters away from the camera because the camera was low down and tilted forwards. and this ultra wide angle exaggerates the size of the foreground in comparison with the rest of the image. So the take-home message when you're shooting with ultra wides is to try and find a shot that doesn't have too much clutter in the background, because we're shooting at more than 100 degrees wide here, and so it's very easy to get a lot in, but that means that you can get confusion and chaos in the background, and also to tilt the camera forwards and find something in the foreground that's interesting, so that you've got really two shots in one here. We've got an interesting foreground and we've got this beautiful sky and sunset in the background, and the exaggerated angle of the ultra wide lens is going to give us these diagonals to draw the eye from the foreground into the background for you. So I hope you've enjoyed that video. Remember, pixels are free, so get out there and shoot more, and I'll see you soon. Bye.